This is a big video because there were 4 city challenge events over in China this weekend. Of course, Riftbound has been out in China for a very long time, and therefore the players in China are going to be more experienced. The deck lists are going to be more refined. So I think that the deck lists in today's videos are absolutely the ones that you should be trying out at your local game stores. There is a caveat to this, which is that these events are a best of 1 format until the finals take place, where it is a best of 3. So the battlefields in a best of 1 format, you have your 3 battlefields, but 1 is randomly selected at the start of the game, and you don't have access to your sideboard. That is, of course, not counting the finals, but when we're looking at these decks, we're really just going to disregard the battlefields to some extent. We're going to disregard the sideboards, and we're really just going to focus on those main decks. The first tournament we're going to be looking at had over 114 players, and it was won not by Kaiser, not by Master Yi, but by Victor, and this is absolutely fascinating. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more Riftbound meta reports. Thank you to the channel sponsor Card Market. If you're in Europe and looking to buy Riftbound cards, you should do so on Card Market. It's the biggest marketplace in Europe for trading card games. So Victor won the whole thing. They, of course, had the yellow Victor as their chosen champion. We have seen some players going for the blue Victor recently, which is a bit of an anti-Kaiser tech. But this yellow Victor is just an amazing engine card. It can chill at your base. You send in all your other characters into the battlefields. And when one of those dies, you get to replace it essentially with a recruit token. Of course, this deck looks to build up lots of recruit tokens to finish the game with Grand Stratagem, where you give friendly units +5 might this turn. But these recruit tokens are also really good at helping you control the board, because Call the Weak, each player kills one of their units. Of course, you can just kill one of your 1 might recruit tokens, and your opponent might be forced to kill their best card. Recruits are also just very good in Riftbound because it gives you a way of scoring points into empty battlefields for the lowest possible commitment, right? Like if you move, for example, a 4 might card into an open battlefield to score 1 point, your opponent is most likely going to be able to remove that in some way the next turn, and you lose a 4 might card. Whereas with a 1 might recruit, it's extremely low commitment, particularly when you play Victor. So Victor is sort of a hybrid swarm deck mixed in with a little bit of control. And of course, this performs so well that we are going to really have to analyze it quite deeply. I think that the biggest thing that I noticed that caught my eye is 3 copies of the Seal of Unity. This is the yellow seal, which allows you to pay a power cost for free. Seals, in my opinion, are the most underrated cards in Riftbound. They're quite difficult to use, and they're also quite difficult to evaluate. But I've been singing the praises of the blue seal in my Teemo deck for many months now, and I love to see certain decks using the seal. So seals are best when you have a deck where you have enough card draw, but you start running out of runes. When you have expensive power costs, and you have loads of cards in hand that you want to play, but you just don't have quite enough runes to play them. When you have a deck like that, that's when seals can be really good, because what you're essentially doing is you're playing 1 card from your hand in order to get more runes in the long run. The first turn you play a seal, it pays for itself, and then the following turn, it's basically giving you 1 rune extra each time you pay a power cost. It doesn't work exactly like that, but it just helps you have a nice steady flow of runes. And again, it gives you 1 card less in hand, but it gives you more runes to play with in the long run. A key thing to know when you're playing seals is that you can float an energy, which I covered in my top tips video if you want to check that out. That essentially means that you can exert a rune, then pay the power cost, but that rune that you exerted has been added to your pool of energy. But with this deck, that's not going to come up as often. The key thing that you need to note with a seal is that you don't just want to play a seal down as soon as you can. You want to play your first seal the first turn you're going to be paying a power cost. For example, if you're going to be playing Call the Weak this turn, that would be the perfect time to play the Seal of Unity down onto the board. Also worth mentioning that with the seals, you can pay for the next seal with the first seal, So in theory, you could play 3 seals all in one turn, and it would only cost you that 1 initial power. So seals, I think, are great cards. They can be a little bit awkward as a top deck, but when you are also hiding cards, they have more synergy, because of course you can pay a power cost to hide a card, such as the Hidden Blade, such as Sprite Call and Consult the Past. And of course, when you've got big, expensive cards like Grand Stratagem, which are going to be costing huge amounts of power, it is allowing you to still maintain a decent amount of runes. What you would really like to be able to do, for example, is play Grand Stratagem and then still have enough runes available the following turn to close out the game with a 1,000-tail Watcher. It allows you to just play hit after hit, and I love seeing these Seals of Unity in the deck. In terms of the 2 drops, there's Daring Poro, Soaring Scout, Watchful Sentry. There is also the Blastcon Fae, which is not really a card you're going to be wanting to play on your first turn because of that blue power cost, if you can at all help it. But it is a nice hidden card to play later on. Again, lots of hidden cards in this deck. Hidden cards are very, very strong, and Seals have a big synergy with hiding cards because you can get that power cost for free. Sprite Mother's also in there as a 1-of. We also see the Machine Evangel as a 2-of. This has Death Knell, play 3 1 Might Recruit tokens into your base. Again, this is a card which, if you're not playing Seals, would be very difficult to justify. But once you add these Seals into the deck, any card with a yellow power cost becomes significantly more interesting. Of course, Hidden Blade, Cole the Weak, Vanguard Captain are sort of staple cards, as well as the Grand Stratagem in these kinds of decks that have those yellow power costs, even the Imperial Decree. And then, of course, Consult the Past, Sprite Call, and the Blastcon Fae, even though they are not costing specifically yellow power, you can use the Seal to hide these cards, which is really, really nice. 2 1,000-tailed Watchers, often we might see 3. There's also 2 Singularities, Singularity being preferred over Riptide Rex. Those cards are very, very similar. Riptide Rex is a unit which deals 6 to 1 unit, and then the Singularity is a spell which deals 6 to up to 2 units. And this is one of the few ways that you can remove cards at the base. There's also 1 copy of Divine Judgment. Each player chooses 2 units, 2 gears, 2 runes, and 2 cards in their hands. Recycle the rest. This is another card which is synergizing with those Seal of Unities. Divine Judgment is particularly good against those Dazzling Aurora decks because you can force your opponent to get rid of their Dazzling Aurora, and then you can be in a really, really good position. Again, the sideboard, I don't think we should take too much of a deep look at, but it is worth noting that Siphon Power is not actually in the main deck whatsoever, which is Victor's signature spell. And then most of the other cards on the sideboard here are cards which you're going to be, maybe calling in certain matchups. But again, this is a best of 1 format, so the sideboard not really too important in the grand scheme of things. The 3 battlefields were Candlelit Sanctum, which is like a very neutral battlefield. It doesn't really benefit either player particularly much. There was also the Trifarian War Camp, which is of course very beneficial for Victor because you're swarming the board. And finally, there was Vymor's Lair, which units can't be moved from here to base. And that is a really good pick with this deck as well, because this deck doesn't really have any movement tools, whereas a lot of the purple decks in particular and the green decks can have quite a few movement capabilities. So just shutting down those is a nice tech card. So it basically has 1 sort of neutral battlefield, 1 battlefield which really benefits the Victor deck, and 1 battlefield which is sort of like a tech against opponents. Again, if this was a best of 3 tournament, you would likely see a different battlefield setup. You would likely see a different sideboard and maybe even a different main deck, because your sideboard strategy would be different. So it is important to bear that in mind, that this is a best of 1 build, but I love the general concept. Like in a best of 1 build, you're essentially just putting like the generically best cards in the deck that you want on average. But when you introduce best of 3 with sideboards and different battlefield strategy, that would change the main deck as well, I'm sure. But that is so cool to see Victor popping off with a bit of a different build to what I'm used to seeing as well. And it's definitely one that I am keen to check out. All right, second place was Teemo. Wow, this was an exciting tournament. Teemo's my favorite deck. Again, sideboard, we're not going to take too much of a deep look at because of the tournament format. The 3 battlefields, the Dreaming Tree, which is the first time you choose a friendly unit with a spell here, draw 1. This has a lot of synergy with this deck with Retreat, but you can also use your own Stupefies which yeah, they are in the deck. I was going to say, wow, no Stupefy. You can use your own Stupefies onto your own cards to basically draw an extra card in some spots with that battlefield. Fight or Flight and Flash, as well as Ride the Wind, are all good options to trigger the Dreaming Tree. Whispering Hillock is interesting. I call it Whispering Hillock. That's a Gwent card. Windswept Hillock is in this one as well, which units here gain ganking. That's quite an aggressive battlefield, but it's got a lot of synergy with Dr. Mundo. If you can get Dr. Mundo into the Windswept Hillock, you can take over the game very quickly. And finally, Zorn Warrens, which is a battlefield which has some synergy with Dr. Mundo and is also quite neutral. In a best of one format, you're not going to want to play a battlefield which is particularly good when going first, because you don't have that agency over, oh, I'm going first this game, so I'll pick this battlefield that's going first. So we're seeing many more neutral battlefields than you might expect to see in a best of 3 format. Titan are just one copy of, 3 students, 3 traveling merchants. The traveling merchant can fill up your discard very quickly for Dr. Mundo, and just gives you some consistency of having a turn 2 play and allowing to use your Teemo for something else later on. 1 Yordle, 1 Monk, 1 Watcher, 1 Scrap Heap, 3 Gust, 1 Retreat, 3 Stack Deck, 3 Stupefy, 1 Convergent Mutation. This card has some amazing synergy with hidden cards, because you could target, for example, your Dr. Mundo and then turn your Teemo into like a 16 strength plus card. 1 Flash is in there, 1 Guerrilla Warfare, which is Teemo's signature spell, but very, very fascinating. 3 Ride the Winds. We see some players just going for 2. Invert Timelines time 2. Each player discards their hand and draws 4. This is like a really punishing card against greedy decks, which just hold a lot of cards in their hand. A well-timed Invert Timelines could also potentially discard your opponent's Dazzling Aurora. If you expect that they've got it in their hand already, you could just play this just before they get it, and then there's a good chance that they don't draw into another one. It's a risky play, but certainly something you can do. It's best to use, though, of course, when your opponent has tons of cards in hand and you don't have many. Just 2 Consult the Past and 2 copies of the Harrowing. Play a unit from your trash, ignoring its energy cost. So if your opponent is able to get rid of your Dr. Mundo, suddenly you play the Harrowing and you play a Dr. Mundo down for 6 and 2 purple power instead of 8 and 2 blue power. And of course, it's got amazing synergy with the Traveling Merchants. In previous videos of Teemo decks, I've wondered how worth it the Traveling Merchants are. But when you're playing the Harrowing, you don't actually have to hold this Dr. Mundo in your hand. You can discard it with your Traveling Merchant and be very fine with that, because then you're actually going to be able to play it for less than its original cost with the Harrowing. So the Harrowing is got huge synergy in this deck. Very, very fascinating to see. On the sideboard, which is of course not as relevant, more of the same that's really in the main deck, with Rasa the Sunderer being a slightly different edition, as well as 1 copy of the Rebuke as well. Only 1 Retreat is quite interesting. Retreat's like a really good card against Kai'Sa, but only 1 copy of it in the deck. Very, very interesting. Also only 1 Thousand-Tailed Watcher. So this build in particular is really banking on that Dr. Mundo. It's filling up the discard heavily with the Traveling Merchant and all of these spells, and then it's getting the Mundo down into a battlefield using Ride the Wind, Flash, Fight or Flight, and also potentially even the Windswept Hillock to move it around and take over the game at the end. So cool. Now, third place was a Kai'Sa deck. This Kai'Sa deck is using the Noxus Hopeful. It's also got 1 Mega Mech as a way of like competing with cards like Dr. Mundo potentially. 2 Smoke Screens, 2 Time Warps, 3 Darius. There's going to be a whole bunch of Kai'Sa decks, I'm sure, in this video. So we won't take the biggest look at them. I think most Kai'Sa decks are looking relatively similar in the grand scheme of things. I'm generally more interested in the decks which aren't Kai'Sa. We've got a Master Yi, which finished in the top 4. And this is a Dazzling Aurora Master Yi deck. So it does seem as though the best Dazzling Aurora build is Master Yi at this point. It's certainly the one that's having the best results over the past week or so from the tournaments that I've been looking at on the channel. By playing the Master Yi with the Dazzling Aurora, you get access to a very strong champion, which can enter ready and only costs you 1 power. That can be really significant to just keep you in the game. And of course, the Master Yi ability is quite good. Not massively relevant, interestingly, with the Dazzling Aurora builds. It's really more, the reason that you use Master Yi is you get access to a good champion, which can enter ready and only spend 1 power, and also has ganking. So it can really help you take over the game because you're going to have a slow start. But what you get by playing green is more so why you would play Master Yi with Dazzling Aurora. You get access to Ziona's Hourglass. These Dazzling Aurora decks, of course, you don't want to play many units. You just want lots of big, expensive units. So having gear and spell cards that you can play in the early game are very, very important. And this is a fantastic example of that. The next time a friendly unit would die, kill this instead and recall that unit exhausted. So you could play the Ziona's Hourglass early on. You could play Master Yi down from your champion zone. It can enter ready. And then even if it dies, if you've got a Ziona's Hourglass, you can just return it to the base, and then it can go the next turn to help you just clear your opponent's board. Like when you're playing a Dazzling Aurora deck, if you get to the late game, you're going to win. So it's just about controlling as much as you can in the early game to prevent your opponent from winning. What else do you get then from playing green? You get Charm, move an enemy unit, Defy, which can stop spells, Discipline, which is one of the best combat tricks in the game, give a unit +2 might and draw 1. You also get Find Your Center, which is another ramp card, and I think that's a huge reason to play this. Orange has access to Mobilize. Only 2 copies is fascinating, by the way. That's not something I've seen before. And it also has access to Catalyst of Aeons. But green also has access to Find Your Center. If an opponent's score is within 3 points of the victory score, this costs 2 less. So you can potentially, with this deck, pay 1 to draw 1 and channel 1 Rune Exhausted. Absolutely absurd. That is possibly one of the biggest reasons, I think, to play Master Yi with Dazzling Aurora. It's this Find Your Center card, and it's Ziona's Hourglass. That would be my impression. There's Rune Prison, which stuns a unit, which means it doesn't deal combat damage this turn. That's a huge combat trick as a one-off. And Wind Wall to counter a spell. Those are the early game green cards, but then you've also got some big top end units like the Tasty Fey Folk, which can enter ready, and when it dies, you channel 2 runes exhausted and draw 1. There's only 1 copy of that, but there are 3 copies of the White Flame Protector. When you play me, give a unit +8 might this turn. Bunch of orange cards on the sideboard, which we don't really need to analyze too much because the sideboard was never relevant for this deck because it didn't make it to the final. And then the 3 battlefields, of course, 1 randomly selected, increase the points needed to win the game by 1. Each player starts with 1 rune extra, and when you conquer here, recycle 1 of your runes. Those are 3 battlefields we're used to seeing with these Dazzling Aurora decks. There's also Confront, units enter ready and draw 1, and Primal Strength for the unit 7+. Very cool to see Master Yi, Dazzling Aurora do so well. Because this, like, legend, we know it's so strong in, like, traditional Master Yi builds. Like, it's absolutely absurd. But the legend is, it's obviously not irrelevant, but honestly, it's not the reason you're playing it. You're playing it to get access to these green cards like Defy, Discipline, Ziona's Hourglass, and I think in particular, Find Your Center. The fact that this player played only 2 Mobilize and 3 Find Your Center tells you just how good this card is in this deck. It's absolutely absurd. Let's look at the other top 8 lists from this tournament because it was the biggest one. We've got a Teemo deck, which is playing Nocturne. I love Nocturne. It is my favorite card in this game. Nocturne is when you look at cards from the top of your deck and you don't draw them and you see me, you may play me for 1 power. That has really big synergy with stacked deck. So if you play stacked deck, you can pick a different card, reveal the Nocturne, and then play the Nocturne down for 1 power. And Nocturne can be played at a battlefield you control or played at your base. But because it has ganking as well, you can score a lot of extra points. Like, Nocturne is so much extra tempo, but it's a very big high roll card. If you end up with Nocturne in your hand, it feels really bad. But that, therefore, has nice synergy with the Traveling Merchant, which we already know has big synergy potentially with Dr. Mundo. But this build is not playing Dr. Mundo at all, which is so fascinating. Instead, this is like a tempo build. So this is going to be a deck which is maybe going to be a bit worse against Kaiser without that Dr. Mundo. But it's going to be better against, I don't want to say everything else, but like kind of pretty much everything else. You're going to have more tempo. Maybe you would be a little bit weaker in mirror matchups. But if you can high roll the Nocturne, the potential value of a Nocturne in the early game is huge. Because the other way you can get Nocturne out is with this blue Teemo. This is a card which is errated, which it essentially now just reads, when I defend, reveal the top 5 cards of your main deck. Deal 1 to an enemy unit here for each card with hidden, then recycle them. That means if you defend with this Teemo, and of course often it's going to be hidden if your opponent moves into your battlefield and you have a hidden Teemo, you reveal the Teemo, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. For every hidden card, you deal 1 damage to a chosen opponent unit. Only 1, you have to announce what that is before you actually reveal the top 5 cards. But then if there's a Nocturne within that, that's also going to summon the Nocturne onto the board, which can be added to the battlefield and give you even more points in that battlefield to catch your opponent off guard. I really, really love the Teemo. It is a very, very fun one. 2 Tide Turners, 2 Ember Monks, 1 Kaiser, which has ganking. When I conquer, you may play a spell from your trash with energy cost less than your points without playing its energy cost, then recycle it. So playing a spell from your trash, probably Singularity is going to be a big target. Invert Timelines as well. And this one has a bunch of hidden cards, which obviously has synergy with the blue Teemo. You've got Sprite Call, which is a nice way of scoring some points as well. Consult the Past, Fight or Flight as well in the mix. Garbage Grabber as a one-off, recycle 3 from your trash, draw 1. Very surprised to see no Dr. Mundo whatsoever. I think that this version of the deck is going to lose to Kaiser, to be honest. I don't think there's enough really that's going to help you out against Kaiser. And when like the meta is so dominated by Kaiser, I'm kind of surprised to see a build like this do so well. But it just shows you that you can build decks in different ways. And I love Nocturne so much. This is kind of similar to the versions of Teemo that I was playing before Kaiser was so dominant in terms of like meta share. Another top 8 Victor. This one using 2 Seals of Unity. It's got 1 Blast Confay, only 2 Vanguard Captains, 2 Stupefies, 2 Smokescreen, 1 Vengeance, 1 Facebreaker, 3 Singularity, which is a lot of singularities, and 1 Machine Avenger. We obviously looked at that other Victor deck earlier on in the video, but this is a similar take on it, but slightly different. I think the winning deck is the one that will be net decking more so. Another Kaiser, this one in the top 8. This one's on 2 retreats. It's also on 1 Orb of Regret. Yeah, Kaiser, we're going to see a lot of Kaiser. Another Kaiser, I told you there'll be a lot. This is another top 8 list. This one's on 3 retreats, which is going to help in the mirrors. It's also on 1 Draven, which you don't see all that often, and only 2 Darius. I like the Darius more so. The fact that it can be readied, I think is really, really powerful. All right. I wanted to show you some of the other top 16 deck lists from this particular tournament because it was the biggest one. So some of the decks that I found a little bit more interesting. Let me just refresh because there was a bit of a glitch there. This one's playing 1 Seal of Discord. It is a Dr. Mundo build with the Traveling Merchants. It's got 1 Wrath of the Sunder, 1 Scrap Heap, 1 Retreat, 3 Invert Timelines, which is fascinating. That is going to juice up your Dr. Mundo. And then the Harrowing as well to play the Dr. Mundo from your discard more cheaply. It's such a cool little combo. Definitely one that I want to experiment with myself. And then there was also an Annie deck in the top 16, which I wanted to show you again. Top 16 out of 114 players at such a big event is really, really impressive. 2 Sneaky Deckhands. This is a card particularly good with an Annie deck. If you're going second, you really want to be going first with an Annie deck generally because you are an aggro deck. But then if you're going second, the Sneaky Deckhand on your first turn at 3 runes, you play the Sneaky Deckhand, and then a lot of the time that's going to be kind of bad with most decks because then your opponent just moves in and clears out your Sneaky Deckhand. But of course with Annie, you're going to ready 2 runes and you can protect the Sneaky Deckhand with cards like Fight or Flight, Gust, etc. Also, you could even do Ride the Wind as well and score some really big early points. The chosen champion is the purple Annie, which can return a spell from your trash to your hand. There's 1 Chemtech Enforcer, 2 Poros, 2 Vise. So not a bunch of 2 drops, to be honest. Actually quite low on the 2 drops. Then there's 3 Kaisers, 3 Noxus Hopeful, 3 Darius, Mind Splitter. There's 3 Scrap Peeps, which is also a card which you could play on turn number 2. If you didn't find anything else, you could then destroy this down the line with acceptable losses. There's also synergy with the Traveling Merchants that aren't being played though. But there is probably the Zorn Warrens. Battlefield, when you conquer here, discard 1, then draw 1. That has some nice synergy with the Scrap Heap. Kind of surprised to see Scrap Heaps in the mix without the Traveling Merchants, though. But there we go. On to another top 16 deck, which is Set. This one is using the set Brawler as the chosen champion. But there's also set Kingpin as well in the mixer, so it's possible that they actually ended up going for Kingpin some of the time as well. Spend my buff, give me +4 might this turn, and then the Kingpin is I get +1 might for each buffed unit at my battlefield. This one is on 8 2-drops, so quite consistent. 1 first mate, 1 Fiora. There's 3 copies of the Kinku Monk. When you play me, buff 2 other friendly units. There's 3 Kianas, 2 set Kingpins. There's an Arena Bar, which is a gear which you can exhaust and buff a exhausted friendly unit. 2 Sabotage, which is a good discard card, good at dealing with Dazzling Aurora. Then there is Showstopper, which is set signature spell. 3 copies of that. Buff a friendly unit in your base, then move it to a battlefield. Moving cards is very strong in this game, and this is also something you can't do in your opponent's turn, but you could do on a exhausted card of your own. Like you could hold a battlefield, let's say, with a big set. You could then, at the start of your turn, move it back to your base, and then use Showstopper to move it into the other battlefield to gain a bunch of control, catch your opponent off guard, and score some extra points. There's 1 Unyielding Spirit, prevent all spells and ability damage this turn, 3 Challenge, 1 Face Breaker, which is a stun effect, 3 Hidden Blade, 3 Wallop. As you play this, you may spend a buff as an additional cost. If you do, ignore the spell's cost and ready a unit. So you can potentially pay 0 to ready a unit. Again, another great way of scoring extra points, catching your opponent off guard. Call to Glory. As you play this, you may spend a buff as an additional cost, and if you do, ignore this spell's cost. So again, you could have no runes open, but you could pay 0 for it and really catch your opponent off guard. That's a card you got to be careful of when you're playing against yellow with buffs, is that they might have no runes available, but Call to Glory is a combat trick which can cost nothing. So that's a really nice option. On to the next event, which is a 64-player event in Changchun, and Kaiser won this one. Again, only same sort of system where it's a best of 1 until the finals, so we'll really just focus on the main deck. There was 2 Kaisers in this one. In terms of the 2-drops, there was 8 2-drops, again, quite consistent. Lecturing Yordle as 2 of, which is going to be a nice option to play when you're going second on your first turn. There's 2 Noxus Hopeful, we usually see 3, but this one's got 3 Darius, 3 Thousand Tail Watchers, and then 3 Cleave, 3 Hextech Rays, 2 Retreats, 3 Stupefies, 3 Falling Stars, 1 Smokescreen, 1 Void Seeker, 2 Acarthian Rain, and 2 Time Warps as well. In second place, it was Set. So a very good result for Set. Couldn't deal with Kaiser in the best of 3, but did so well to get this far. Great to see both Set and Victor with great results in these tournaments. This one is on 9 2-drops, so a little bit more consistency going for that 9th 2-drop. 2 First Mates, 3 Noxian Drummers. When I move to a battlefield, play a 1 Might Recruit token here. There's 3 copies of Fiora when I'm Mighty, which means that when they have 5 Might or more, they have Deflect, Ganking, and Shield. And of course, there's quite a lot of ways of giving buffs to cards in this deck. The Kinku Monk being one example of that. Set Kingpin and Set Brawler are both in there. Also, a couple copies of Lee Sin Centered, which can come in readied if you use the Accelerate ability, which is definitely an ability that I love to have in my deck. And other buffed friendly units at my battlefield have +2 might. 2 copies of the Arena Bar, 3 Showstoppers, 2 Challenge, 1 Face Breaker, only 2 Hidden Blade, 2 Wallops, and 3 Call to Glory. Let's just take a quick look at the sideboard because it was relevant for the final round as well, just so you guys can see that. Third place was a Master Yi deck. This one also using Dazzling Aurora. This one did use 3 Mobilize, which I think, honestly, I prefer the 3 Mobilize than just the 2. I feel like it's going to be worth it in the long run, that little bit of extra consistency. And also 3 Find Your Center and 3 Catalysts. I think I would just go for this every time, like the 3, 3, and 3. There's also 3 Disciplines. Only 2 Charms and only 2 Defies is also a little bit surprising. 2 Sabotage, 2 Challenge, 3 Confront, 1 Meditation, and then sort of just similar top-end cards with 1 Mountain Drake being in the mix as well. Top 4 Yasuo. Like, a lot of people were kind of dooming and glooming the meta, like, oh, Kaiser and Master Yi are just so much better than everything else. But it really shows you that with Yasuo and Teemo and Set and Victor having such good results this weekend in China, where the meta is so developed, the Kaiser is very beatable once you get to know how to do it. You're just going to have to be very clean in your play. And I love this Wind Rider Chosen Champion. I really want to try this deck out. It's got to be one of my favorite cards in the game. The third time I move in a turn, you score 1 point. I just love the concept of having a card which can win the game without having to score a battlefield. Like, get to 7 and then just get the Wind Rider down, move it 3 times, GG, unlucky mate. That is just such a cool thing to be able to do. And that is the Chosen Champion in this deck. There is 3 copies of Tide Turner, of course, which is some big movement abilities. The other movement tools that you have is the Yasuo Legend ability, which once a turn you can pay 2 to move a friendly unit to your base. Fight or Flight is a great movement tool. Flash is a one of. There's also Ride the Wind as another movement option. So cool. We see Sona, which when I'm at a battlefield, ready 4 runes at the end of your turn. That is very, very spicy to be able to do more combat tricks with things like Defy, Discipline. Of course, there's 3 Ziona's Hourglass as well, which can recall a unit. Exhausted. There's 3 Canes. Cane is like the other big... Well, it's actually the main big movement card that synergizes with this deck as like your big powerhouse play. If I have moved twice this turn, I don't take damage. So the Yasuo here is like a Chosen Champion to try and win the game that you just got access to. That means that if you're like close to 7, your opponent has to really be careful that you could win the game. But the Cane is like the big powerhouse synergy card with this deck. When a friendly unit attacks or defends alone, give it +1 might this turn. 3 copies of Mask of Foresight is interesting. 2 Tasty Fey Folk. Only 1 on guard is a little bit surprising, and only 2 Fight or Flight is also kind of surprising to me. I think that Fight or Flight is just such an absurdly good card that I would have expected to see a 3rd copy of it in the mix. There's also no Charms in this deck, which is also interesting. So cool to see Yasuo doing so well. Invert Timelines is a card draw option, as this deck does struggle for card draw a little bit, and that's going to be really punishing against some decks which just want to be mega greedy and end up with a bunch of cards in hand. Huge result for Yasuo in 4th place. Also, apparently, like, whenever I cover this champion, people always get triggered that I'm mispronouncing it. So, sorry if I am. Misfortune up next is the top 16 deck. Did a lot of Kaiser, did really well in the top 8, but I wanted to just showcase some of the different decks which finished quite high up. And again, just a reminder to check out Card Market, the channel sponsor, if you're looking at picking up singles in Europe. Card Market's the place to do so. Also, if you guys want to support the channel further, you can check out my Patreon, where I do personalized deck building support and one-to-one contact that you can get with me about Riftbound or other, well, Lorcana. Riftbound and Lorcana are the 2 main games I'm playing. So this is a Misfortune deck that's playing Dazzling Aurora. Really good in Dazzling Aurora mirror matchups because you get access to a lot of discard cards, particularly the Mind Splitter, which is when you play me, choose an opponent, they reveal their hand, choose and discard a card from it. There's also the Soul Gorger, which when you play me, you may play a unit from your trash, ignoring its energy cost. Misfortune is the Chosen Champion, can come in ready, but it is going to cost you 2 power, whereas Master Yi Legend is costing you just 1, although it is a little bit more expensive, of course, the Yi. And then the Misfortune is like a really good way of Legend ability of taking over the game in the late game by giving a unit ganking. You get like your Dead Bloom Predator at a battlefield, ready, and then bam, next turn, giving it ganking. It costs you nothing to do it, and then you just start dominating the game. Particularly good if you have like a big volley bear or something like this there, right? Then the rest of the deck is going to be focused on playing spells and gear because you just want to hit one of these big powerhouse cards off Dazzling Aurora every time. So there's Scrap Heap. When this is played, discarded or killed, draw 1. There's also 1 copy of Acceptable Losses, which allows you to destroy this. This can also deal with your opponent's Dazzling Aurora if they don't have any other gear, because this is a card that, when played, each player chooses which gear is killed. There's 2 Bullet Times, which is the Misfortune signature spell, which is a really good card. Potentially in the late game, you could close the game out by spending a bunch of power to just deal, like, let's say you deal 6 power, spend 6 power to deal 6 damage to everything at a battlefield in a pinch. Like, that is a line that you can absolutely take to close out the game. There's also 2 Invert Timelines as well in the mix. Another deck in the top 16 I wanted to showcase was an Ahri deck. This one is using Ahri Alluring. as the chosen champion, the other Ahri not in the deck. So this is usually a card that you're going to combine with Time Warp, but there's actually no copies of Time Warp in this build at all. There are 8 2-drops, which seems to be sort of like the accepted upon optimal amount, if not 9. There's 2 Yordles. There is 3 Sunlit Guardians, which has Shield 1 and Tank, so it's a 4 might card when defending. 1 Wielder of Water, 2 Sonas, 1 Taric, which is got Shield, Tank, and other friendly units here also have Shield. There is 3 Jewel Colossus, which has Vision, which allows you to look at the top card of your deck, and also has Shield. Then 1 Master Yi. When you have 8+ runes, I have 4 Might, 3 Watchers, 2 Charms, 2 Defies, 3 Blocks, give a unit Shield 3 in Tank this turn, 3 Disciplines, 3 Rune Prison, 2 Wind Walls. Like, this deck looks a bit weird, to be honest. But it's very good to see that it still had a great result, like against, in a very competitive setting. It looks kind of weird, right? Like, it's kind of like, I'm like, what does it do? It's like a very fair deck in many ways. But clearly, it did enough to do very well. All right, the next one we're going to look at is 35 players, so not anywhere near as big. This was a first place Kai'Sa, significantly smaller than the other 2 that we looked at, half the size of the previous one and about a quarter of the size of the first tournament that we looked at, but still very crucial data nonetheless in a competitive setting. This one had Time Warp, 2 copies, 3 retreats, which is going to mean it's probably going to help in the mirrors. Very consistent build here with lots of 3-ofs, 1 additional Pouty Poro, 7 2-drops in this deck. I wanted to show you the top 8 list of this one, which was a Darius deck, because we didn't cover any Darius in this tournament. It was Kai'Sa in second, Master Yi in third, Kai'Sa in fourth, Master Yi, Kai'Sa, top 8. So the only other deck which was not Master Yi or Kai'Sa is a Darius deck. Link will be in the description for all of these if you want to take a look at the other list. You're more than welcome to. And I really like Darius decks. They're quite high rolly. Usually they focus on baited hook, and this build certainly is. Also, some of these decks use seals, but this deck is not playing any seals at all. Just using the bait. Oh, it has 1 Seal of Rage, so really low on the seals. But generally, what this deck wants to do is it wants to get down the baited hook and use it every turn to start getting like big powerhouse cards like Draven out. So the baited hook, you can exhaust it, spend 1 energy and 1 yellow power, kill a friendly unit, and look at the top 5 cards of your main deck. You may play a unit from among them that has might up to 1 more than the killed unit, then recycle the rest. So for example, if you get rid of a Noxus Hopeful with the baited hook, you kill this. You could play, if you see a Darius, anything with 5 might or less, and the top 5 cards you can play for free. This has really good synergy, in particular with Draven Shobo, which is usually very expensive to play at 5 energy and 1 power. But you could banish like a 2 might card, for example, like the Poro, the Pouty Poro here, or the Trifarian Glory Seeker. Banish that with a baited hook. Draven will still be 3 might when you look at it, and it's only when it's on the board that this ability comes through. So that gives you a really good way of getting a big Draven card. If you're playing quite aggressively with this deck, so if you're at like 6 or 7 points and close to winning, Draven becomes even better to help you seal the deal. All right, the next tournament was a 78-player tournament. This is the final one we're going to be looking at. As you can see, Kai'Sa, top 2, Master Yi in third, and an Annie in fourth. So we're going to take a look at some of the more spicy lists as well. Like we can see some Jinxes and some Annies and some sets in the top 16. Starting off with the winning deck list, it was Kai'Sa again. This one is on 9 2-drops, which is more than we usually see. I kind of like the idea of having that little bit of consistency. One of the ways that Kai'Sa can lose is by being a little bit too greedy with the 2-drop slot and just missing a turn 1, right? Like that is like giving your opponent a window of opportunity. I would imagine it probably makes you slightly weaker in the mirror to have so many 2-drops, but the Pouty Poro with Deflect is quite a good card in the mirror anyway, I suppose. There's 2 Yordles, there's 1 additional Kai'Sa champion for 2 total, 3 Noxus Hopeful, 3 Darius, 3 Watchers, 3 Cleaves, 3 Hextech Rays, 2 Retreats, 3 Stupefies, 3 Falling Stars, 1 Progress Day, 1 Akatha, and Rain, 2 Time Warp. So I think like the main thing to note from this one is like a heavy account of 2 cost units, which I personally think is a good idea. Second place is on 8 2-drop units, so still quite a lot. Just 1 less Watchful Sentry, 3 Yordles, So that's kind of like one difference. This deck has one less 2-drops, but one extra 3-drop. Only 2 Cleaves, 1 Smokescreen, 1 Acarthian Rain in this one. Again, the sideboard. Not too relevant in this best of 1 format. Of course, they were relevant in the final. Another Master Yi and the top 4, and it's another Dazzling Aurora deck. It just seems like Dazzling Aurora Yi is the way to go. This one's got 1 Volley Bear, which is spicy, which is a 12 might card. Of course, you can get this out of Dazzling Aurora. I imagine you're almost never going to be able to play this from hand. When an opponent moves to a battlefield other than mine, draw 1. That has synergy with Charm, of course. This one's on 3 Defies, 1 Sabotage, 3 Mobilize, 3 Find Your Center, 3 Catalyst as well. 4th place was Annie. Let's go Annie. Annie popping off. So Annie, quite an aggressive deck. 1 Teemo is kind of surprising to see, if I'm honest. Like, I don't really know that I like the Teemo outside of the Teemo Chosen Champion. As a Chosen Champion, I think it's brilliant. But this is not really a card that you want to be playing down unless you're hiding it. So it feels quite like the application of the Teemo in this deck feels a little bit niche, but it can certainly catch your opponent off guard. Hidden cards can always give you some extra tempo, but it's going to be awkward if you're not hiding it, I suppose. But yeah, 1 Teemo. The opportunity to hide it and catch your opponent off guard is definitely there. Tide Turner can also be hidden, but it's also just a good aggro card to move a card from one battlefield to the other in a certain turn, because you play the Tide Turner to base, put a ready card at a battlefield that had just held back to your base, and then that card is ready and can move to the other battlefield. Vi is a great finisher. It also has ganking to score extra points. There's 3 Kaisers as this comes in ready. Only 2 Noxus Hopeful, 2 Darius, which can also be coming in ready. 3 Cleave, 3 Gust, 3 Stack Deck, 3 Fire Off Flight, 2 Flash, 1 Rebuke, 3 Ride the Wind, 1 Inverted Timelines, and 2 Void Seekers. Big ups to the Annie player. That's awesome. Into the top 8, we've got Jinx. I love Jinx, and I love Annie, and I love Nocturne, and this Jinx deck is using 3 copies of Nocturne. It's only stack deck, which is going to allow you to play the Nocturne, but of course, if it's in your hand, you can discard it very easily with your Jinx. It's also using 3 Seals of Rage, which you can play the power costs for stuff like the Vi, like the Flame Chomper's ability, very, very easily. The Phoenix is in there as a one-off. There's 1 Draven, 3 Sundisk as well. The next unit you play this turn enters ready. There's also 1 Super Mega Death Rocket in the mix there as well. But yeah, love Nocturne in this deck because you've got the high roll potential of stack deck, which is still like kind of consistent to hit Nocturne. You're probably still going to do it quite often. Maybe like 1 in every 3 stack decks, something like that, roughly, is going to hit a Nocturne, I would imagine. Which is still pretty damn good. And like the Nocturne high roll is really, really there. And the downside of Nocturne is very much mitigated when you have a deck filled with cards like Traveling Merchant and filled with cards like, the Jinx Legend as well. And the Chemtech Enforcer. Oh my goodness, there's a Leona in the top 8. I didn't even realize this until I'm seeing it just now. So Leona can stun 1 or more enemy units and then buff a friendly unit. I think that Leona is like a really good legend, but one thing that it kind of suffers from is that there aren't really that many stun effects. So I would imagine that this is probably a deck which is going to become stronger as time goes on. And oh my goodness, there's a baited hook in the Leona deck, which I've never seen. I haven't really seen many Leona decks in general. We're seeing a lot of the cards we'd expect to see, like Defy, Discipline. And then in terms of 2-drops, there is 7, which is not that many. The Leona Chosen Champion, when I attack, stun an enemy here. Then the Spectral Matron, which has really nice synergy with the baited hook. When you play me, you may pay a unit costing no more than 3 energy and no more than 1 power from your trash, ignoring its cost. So Poro Herder and Solari Shield Breaker would be 2 good targets for that. Poro Herder is when you play me, if you control a Poro, buff me and draw 1. And there are 6 Poros in this. And then the Solari Shield Breaker, when you play me, stun a unit. So I think in particular, the stun option, like this is a way of getting more stun effects, right? Like I talked about a big downside of Leona, there aren't that many stun effects. Well, the Spectral Matron is very expensive because it costs 2 power, but it gives you more stun effects essentially. But the Spectral Matron, as expensive as it is, it also has huge synergy with baited hook because you ignore the cost of it. So if you can banish a card, kill a card with 3 might or more, like the Poro Herder, for example, then with the baited hook, then you hit the Spectral Matron in the top 5, you call in the Solaris Shield Bearer, or you can even like kill the Shield Bearer with the baited hook, right? See the Spectral Matron in the top 5, and then your Shield Bearer is suddenly in your trash, the Spectral Matron can resurrect it, and you get more stun effects. When you stun one or more enemy units, buff a friendly unit. And it sounds really spicy. The buffs, the baited hook, all synergizing together. I have to try this deck immediately. There's also 2 Garens, which means your other friendly units here have +1 might. Very interesting to see that. Again, I would imagine a big use of this is playing it from the baited hook. Also 3 Tasty Faith Folk, which has Accelerate potentially in Death Knell, and then the Harness Dragon when you play me kill an enemy unit. So if you can get a 5 might card off the baited hook and find the Harness Dragon, like, whoo, that is huge. What a spicy deck. Also only 2 Rune Prisons, which is one of your stun effects, which is quite interesting. I have to try this Leona deck. That is so damn cool. Oh my goodness. Set in the top 16, I wanted to showcase because it's not something we always see. This one's playing 3 Karmas. When you recycle 1 or more cards, buff a friendly unit. Cool. Primal Strength's in there. Unyielding Spirit. Quite similar to some of the other lists we've seen as well, that's for sure. But I still wanted to highlight it nonetheless. A Jinx deck in the top 16. This one's playing 3 Teemos, which is really fascinating. Also on the Nocturnes, Noxus Hopeful, Seal of Rage, Sundisk, Stack Deck, Ride the Wind, Fight or Flight, and Falling Star, as well as Vi. 3 Teemos is a lot of Teemos, but you kind of just want a lot of 2-drops in this deck as well. And there aren't really that many 2-drops in the game. You want to like empty your hand quite quickly. You can also hide the Teemo with the Seal of Rage, paying the power cost to hide with the Seal. And I think really it's more a fact that this is basically every 2-drop available to you. Like you kind of just need a bunch of 2-drops because you want to empty your hand as quickly as possible to start drawing off Jinx. I think that's a big reason Teemo's in here ×3. There's an Annie deck in the top 16. This one's got 1 sneaky deckhand. Again, like the counts of 2 cost cards and 3 cost cards, I think generally will change when you're playing a best of 3 format because you can sideboard accordingly, right? Like when you're going first, you want a lot of 2 might cards, and when you're going second, you would want more 3 might cards. That's definitely something to consider. But this one has 11 2-drops, although Vi isn't really a card that you want to play that early because of the power cost. So it's more like 8 2-drops with the backup 3 if you're in a pinch. Only 1 Noxus Hopeful, 3 Kaiser, 3 Darius, 3 Cleave, 3 Gust, 3 Stack Deck, 3 Fight or Flight, 2 Flash, 1 Rebuke, 3 Ride the Wind, 2 Void Seeker. Got a few more to look at. Another set deck. This one's on 2 Carnivorous Snapvine. When you play me, choose an enemy unit at a battlefield. We deal damage equal to our mights to each other. Not something you see all the time anymore in these decks. That's the main thing that catches my eye. 3 more decks to look at. We've got a Victor in the top 16. This one's also on 3 seals. Actually looks very similar to the winning deck list that we looked at earlier in the video. 3 Singularity is in this one. There's also 1 Spectral Matron, which could be nice to revive the Vanguard Captain or the Faithful Manufacturer. Only 1 Watcher as well is a little bit surprising to me. Another Annie deck in the top 16. 3 Sneaky Deckhand, 3 Paltipora, 3 Tide Turner, 3 Traveling Merchants. So 9 2-drops. 3 Sneaky Deckhand has great Annie synergy. And again, this kind of decision really is going to look a little bit different depending on if you're playing best of 1 or best of 3 because of the sideboard and how that can impact your 2 and 3 cost cards in particular. 3 Darius, 2 Mind Splitters, which is like a huge top end option. When you play me, choose an opponent, they reveal their hand, choose a card from it, and they discard it. That's going to be particularly good against Dazzling Aurora. 2 Invert Timelines to get some more card draw in the mix as well. And finally, last but not least, another set deck in the top 16 of this one. Is there anything catching the eye? There's a Salvage. You may kill a gear and draw 1, so some Dazzling Aurora tech there. Seems good. Quite like the look of that. Facebreaker also is a stun option. And 1 Misfortune, which has Accelerate and ganking the first turn and move each turn. You may ready something else that's exhausted. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks again to Card Market for sponsoring the video. If you watched this far, give it a like. Check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel further. And see you all very soon for more Riftbound content. Cheerio. And thanks also to Riftex, most importantly, for compiling all this data because it's super duper useful. All the links will be in the description. Bye.